Just show up and you'll win. Welcome to Parking Lot Philosophy, the only show where we practice what we preach. Um, I'm trying to just show up every single day, make a podcast. Every single day I commute. Yesterday I was late, and I think that's one thing. There's a lot of times when you're doing anything. Going to the gym, working on a project, going to work, even hanging out with friends, something that can be fun. There's a lot of times where it's a minor inconvenience happens, and then it's like, okay, I say you, but I mean this is 100% this is me. Um, I'm late. I'm like, fuck, do I want to try and record a podcast episode today? Can I make a coherent enough thought? And half the time I like stumble, over my words and things, and I'm like, well, do I try and do a retake? Can I edit this out? Like, what is the procedure here? And so it's one of those things where I'm just showing up. I'm showing up. I'm putting in this effort, because part of it is with every rep I do of this, with every rep you do it with anything, you get slightly better, especially when you're thinking about it and you're trying to learn and do all these things. Setting up the actual phone like setup, I put it. I have like a Bluetooth speaker. It's similar in size to like the microphone case, but I have to like angle it so that way it actually sits on the dash in a way you can see me. I've gotten amazingly good at setting this thing up first try now, and we're only like 2 weeks in, so I think it's one of those things you don't realize all the progress you're making showing up every single day, but you do realize the progress you're not making when you don't show up and do things. I think a great example of this, like for me, I've always struggled with being consistent on YouTube. And so then what that tends to do is I might get big spikes in my views, and then I will fall back down because it's months before I post again. And this is something where I know I need to be more consistent, but also too, I know I am not learning at a point. For me, YouTube, sorry, I have something in my eye if I'm blinking a lot. For me, YouTube has always been something where I want to learn from it and grow. And especially too, when I have these big gaps, like I know I'm not growing. And especially, for me, it's always been about like video skills, script writing, and Premiere, specifically getting better at editing. And I've told myself for like 6 months to a year at this point, it's like, I'm going to set up my own shortcuts in Premiere. I'm going to set up my own presets. I want to organize my stuff better. And I still haven't done it because I'm not really editing right now. I haven't really done a bunch of stuff. And it's one of those things where, unlike riding a bike, you need to kind of show up and do the reps and just continue to grow, because otherwise you are going to, it'll atrophy like any muscle. And so that is kind of, one thing that I've been thinking about is just continuing to show up every day. I think there's a lot of value in that. And I think too, when you boil down like any self-help book, 90% of the time it's just about, showing up and doing that thing. I think Atomic Habits is like the most, notable example. They literally are just saying, what is it, James Clear? He's saying like every day you should do these things. Not specifically, the things you set out to do. And then you will grow over time. And I will say, when I was habit tracking and things like that, I probably was making more progress than I am now when I'm not habit tracking. However, at the minimum, I think showing up and doing this stuff is going to help you, whether or not you habit track or not. Just saying like, okay, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna do this podcast before I go to work, or I use my examples half the time, but I'm gonna, after work, I'm gonna do the dishes every single day and things like that. The simple things that, hey, you should kind of probably do them anyway. But at least you're making that little bit of progress. There was a podcast I was listening to recently. It's per my last email. It's Morning Brews podcast. Don't hate me, just because you want to be me. But that being said, they had a guest on, and he was talking specifically about like identity houses and how you should kind of have these houses, or not houses, identity rooms. You should have these different rooms of different things. So like, this is your family man room. This is your creator room. This is your work room. And not every room necessarily needs to get the same amount of attention. However, you need to be giving attention to all these different rooms, because if one of them were to collapse, let's say you lose your job and your whole identity is your job, you will collapse as a person. I mean, your house is ruined. And so having these other areas is really important. And one thing he talked about is like, you need to set a minimum amount. Like you have to have these things. And so he's talking about with like the release of his book, which he talks about all this in, he's like, I'm not going to stop coaching my son's games or my daughter's games, because I guess he coaches for them. And he's not going to miss so many family dinners. So he set aside like, hey, I'm not traveling during these weeks because my kids have games. And I'm not going to like do anything in the evening because it's family dinner. And I think that's really like noble of him. I think a lot of people would just kind of set aside family, lifestyle, exercise, all these different things for something like that, for a big book launch. But also too, I think it shows, again, if you show up all the time, you're putting investments into this, you're going to get the results you want. And then that applies even further. I've been reading 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and one of the things in there, which I don't know, I have the book next to me. I can physically pull out the book and read the author's name. Stephen Covey, literally says, you need to be investing in all of your relationships and things. You can't just like let them not grow. If you think about it as a bank, if your relationship with a coworker is you're all the time asking them to do something for you, and you rarely even say like hi to them in the mornings, why are they going to want to do that for you? They're going to despise you. In the inverse, if you are always helping your coworker and things like that and investing in that relationship, they're going to have a really great, relationship with you. And it's the same thing with family. It's the same thing with kids, which is one thing he talks about a lot. I think this book is really, read this book, run to get this book. I got it from our old dean. She had like cleaned out her office, and I on my list for a while. I finally started reading it. I was like, holy crap. My wife and I are always like, we don't have kids yet, but we want kids. And it's one thing where it's like, how do we make sure we make, reasonably good members of society? And I think the book is also a parenting book in a way. Anyway, I digress on that point. At the end of the day, all of the stuff that they're talking about in these books is that showing up and like putting in the work is going to get you where you want to be. And then this further applies. I was talking with a professor recently, because we have our faculty staff meetings. And he was specifically talking about this advice that he gives his students who don't know what they want to do. If you think about your life and you're 65 and you just retired from a wonderful 30-year career in an industry, you climbed the ladder, you got to the top, whatever it is, you don't start in that career until you're 35. So me, being 24, I still have 11 years to actually get to that point. And if you're graduating college, you're 22, you have 13 years to get to that point. If you're only just getting to 20, you've got 15 years to figure out what you're going to be doing. And I think that's like a really powerful thing, because then if you think about, okay, I have 15 years just to get to where all of a sudden I'm going to be in the right stage of my life. I'm just going to show up every day. I'm going to put in, the work, the minimum allotted investment I can, and then you're going to get there easy peasy. And that's the thing. It's one of those, it's such a hard thing every single day to show up. I think that takes a lot of discipline. I really respect people who do that. But at the same time, me trying to do it and trying to show up every day, it's really not that hard unless you give up on yourself. And so, at the end of the day, it's got to be you. You have to be the one to say, I want to go out and do this and whatnot. And with the podcast, sometimes it can be hard. It's an enjoyable podcast. I like talking about stuff like this, but sometimes it's hard for me to get into the flow of like talking about stuff like this, or it's, I've got a bunch of crap in my eye and I keep having to like rub my eye because I can't see. So it's one of those things. It's only hard if you let it pile up. If you're like Sisyphus, you let the boulder roll all the way down. You've got to just keep incrementing, pushing, and pushing. And then eventually you'll realize, like, holy crap, I'm at the top of the mountain. Time to do it all over again. And so I think there is a lot of value in showing up every single day. I think part of it, too, whether it's, you work on a project every single day for just enough time to recognize you're still working on this, I think it gives you a lot of value as well, because you are saying to yourself, like, hey, I am worth the effort that I'm putting into this. I am worth working on this thing I want to work on, rather than just doom scrolling, playing video games, consuming media all the time, like actually doing something. I think is really powerful, whatever you set your mind to. I hope this all makes sense. I don't know if it does, but we're showing up. We're showing up. That's what we're practicing and preaching. Show up, do the thing. And we're going to win. We're going to get there, because, there's so many people who stop showing up. They stop showing up too early. When you're at the casino, you got to keep gambling. Otherwise, you'll never win. That's a joke. I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye for now.